Hi, and welcome to The Bright Balloon, a podcast where I'm sharing bright ideas for your balloon business. My name is Sarah Meyer, and I'm a balloon business owner like you, and I love the creative side of what I do, but I really love the business side, which seems to be the part where most people struggle. So I'm here to help. Each week, I'm bringing you an episode full of bite-sized tips you can use to make tiny improvements to your business. I want you to make more money, eliminate stress, and learn along with me as we grow our creative businesses together. Welcome to The Bright Balloon.
Hello and welcome to this very exciting episode. You guys, this is the 1-year anniversary of this podcast. I can't even believe it. My goal when I started this podcast was to make it 1 year. That's a pretty long time. That's a pretty long commitment for something that you don't really have a plan for. But I think a lot of people start a podcast and then kind of, poop out after 2 or 3 episodes, and then they kind of just disappear. But I am really proud that I've been able to keep this going for a year, and I'm really excited that people seem to be enjoying it. So I am going to take today to talk about what I've learned this last year. I have learned so much from the guests that have been on the show. I've learned so much from actually making the podcast. And then I'm going to talk about plans for the future. So my business looks really, really different than it did a year ago. And as I gear up for Balloon Boss Summit, which is where I kind of plan out my whole next year, I have goal setting and plans kind of on the brain right now. And in the next couple weeks when I head to Florida, I will get really serious about setting goals for my company and new directions. And this podcast has kind of been it's become a part of my company. It was kind of like a little side project, but I'm really into it. I really like it. I think there's a ton of potential here, and I'm excited to figure out what comes next. Before we get into the episode though, I did want to mention that I started a Patreon account. So if you're not familiar with Patreon or podcasts, basically Patreon is a way for podcasters to get paid for their podcasts. So I do not charge anything. Obviously, this is a totally free resource. I love keeping it free for everybody. And with that said, I don't really have any advertisers. I don't really have any sponsors except for Balloon Coach. I like to keep the episodes ad-free, and I like to keep them, I guess, agenda free, if that makes sense. I think if I had a bunch of advertisers and sponsors that I was trying to keep happy, that would really impact what I talked about and kind of how honest I was able to be. So with all that said, I don't really have any plans to bring on advertisers or more sponsors. I really like the freedom that I have in the way that the podcast is currently formatted, and I hope that you also like that. However, it is a lot of work and a lot of energy to create weekly episodes, to organize people to come on the show, all of the technical stuff, all the editing, I'm doing it all myself, which is why sometimes email reminders are missed or Instagram posts are missed. There's a lot to do. So in order to kind of fuel the podcast going forward, I've launched a Patreon, and the link to that is in the show notes. Basically, if you have been listening to this podcast for the past year and you get value out of it, if you think it's a good resource for your business, there are 2 tiers. One is a $3 monthly contribution, and that is just think of it as leaving a tip, a little bit of encouragement, you'd like to see the podcast continue, and that will give me a little bit of funding so I can help kind of outsource some of the things that are taking up a lot of my time, like some of the social media stuff, some of the reminders and the advertising. And then there is another tier, which is $5 a month. And with that one, you get a little sticker. So again, if this is not in your budget right now, if you are not a huge fan and you just drop in every once in a while, I totally get it. You do not have to pay money to listen to this podcast. It is completely free. But again, if you find this resource valuable, if you want to give a little bit of a, think of it like a tip. That's really what it is. If you're enjoying the content and you want to send me a little bit of encouragement, I would really appreciate that. It is a monthly contribution, so keep that in mind. It's not one time. It'll just come out of your PayPal monthly, and then you can cancel if you need to. But again, I'm not trying to be salesy. I'm not trying to twist anybody's arms. But if this is something that you want to see in the future, that would help. A little bit of financial backing would help because I hired an assistant, you guys. Actually, I hired a digital strategist because she is more than an assistant. And I'm going to talk about that in a full episode in excruciating detail. We're going to have her on. Her name is Nicole, and she's already helped me so much. But with that, check out the Patreon so that I can get Nicole onboarded to help get regular notifications out for these podcast episodes so that we can bring you more courses, so that we can bring you more resources, all those things you guys have been asking for. I'm just kind of tapped out doing this and my balloon business and working a full-time job. So if you'd like to support the show, that link is available in the show notes. But with that, let's jump into this episode where I'm going to talk about the last year of my business and how this podcast has really directly impacted me and how I'm doing things. So the first thing I just kind of spilled the beans on is that I hired help finally, which is really weird because it doesn't feel like I've needed to hire help for a really long time. It's not something that I was dragging my feet on. Really, it was something that I think I kind of fought against for a long time. I genuinely didn't think I needed help because I have 17 hats, because I have a very robust project management software. I was able to do a lot on my own. However, really the turning point for me was when I talked to my friend Erin on the podcast, and she talked about hiring help, and she made it really approachable. I think I was more intimidated than I let on by some of the things like, taxes and payroll, and quite honestly, things I still haven't figured out. But again, I've always kind of jumped in and then figured out things later on. So that's what I am doing. And just talking with Erin about kind of her pay range, like she was going to pay someone $15 to $20 an hour for 5 hours a week. That's not very much money. That's $100 a week. That's less than the cost of one balloon column. So for me, it was really that oversimplification of how non-stressful this decision is. My other fear in hiring someone was that I didn't really know where they would fit in the fold of my process. I didn't want to hire someone to inflate balloons. I didn't want to hire someone to do proposals or designs or even really manage my email. So I didn't quite know where someone fit. And this is why I'm going to record an entire episode about this with Nicole. But what we figured out is that 17 Hats made it really easy to loop her into the process that I already had into place. So instead of just saying well, here's my inbox, my email password, good luck. It was here's my workflow. Where do you think you can help me? And because I hired the greatest person in the world, she has helped me so much. She's a 17 Hats expert. She's already gone through and cleaned up my workflows. She's rewritten my templates. She is kind of taking over the back end of the processes. So confirmation of delivery, follow up on jobs, asking for Google reviews, all of those things that I kind of leave out because they're not the most crucial. So already having her on board has been so great. And that my mind was changed when I talked to my friend Erin, and she made hiring sound so approachable. The other thing I should say is that all of these episodes that I am going to reference, I will put in the show notes. So I will link back. If you're not sure which episode I'm talking about, go to the show notes and I will link to the episode where Erin talks about hiring her first staff member. Side note, we'll have to have Erin on again because she has 4 employees now. Just like she said she probably would in the podcast. She went from 0 to 4 really quick. So link back to listen to her episode if you missed it. The other thing that I've talked about quite a bit this year is my financial changes. I implemented Profit First at the beginning of last year, and it is a way that I kind of do my, shorthand bookkeeping, basically. Not even bookkeeping, but the way I just kind of track my numbers. And it has been really, really great at ensuring that I pay myself. Before, I was just kind of keeping everything in one big account, and I never really took money out. So I wasn't really sure what I was being paid as an owner. And that made it really hard to know if I could afford to hire someone. So getting Profit First implemented has been really great. Again, I will link to that show in the show notes. Because I talk about it in depth and all the percentages. And if you haven't purchased the book yet, please do that by the end of the year and just consider it. I think it's great for solopreneurs, especially if you're the only person running your business. Sometimes that's when you get into trouble because it feels like all the money is yours anyway. So why go out of your way to set up like complicated, financial stuff because it's all your money? Well, again, that is the trap that I was falling into, but really what was happening is that I wasn't paying myself anything versus now I have a set payment structure for myself. So I know that I am making 50% of every single sale. It just goes directly into my bank account and it never gets mixed with business ever again. Like it's my money, it's my paycheck, it's not going back into the business. So that has been really freeing to kind of figure out and put profit first into place. Another thing directly taken from an episode, this was an episode with Allie from Charming Garlands. She really opened my eyes to the idea of offering grab and go garlands. I mean, in general, it could be any pickup option, but for me, the garlands were a good choice because that's what people order a lot. People love the organic garlands. They need them for baby showers and birthday parties, and delivering them on the event date kind of sucks because sometimes it's like $100 order that you have to drive and drop off, but really like, are you gumming up the works and you are filling your calendar with these little low cost jobs and not keeping your calendar open for these really high profit, maybe like corporate or citywide functions. Like those should be the things that I am focusing on Saturdays, on the weekends. And these little grab and go garlands, like those can be things that people pick up, especially because now I have a designated location. I moved to a shop, which I really thought was going to be like a game changer in my business. And it's actually been a bit of a struggle to figure out how to best use that space other than just as a designated balloon room. So I'm excited that the grab and go garlands are giving me kind of a more of a storefront appearance. Like people are now coming to the shop. It's still not done yet. It's still a work in progress, but they're coming, they're picking up. I've really kind of started figuring out like what that pickup process looks like. I've had to kind of get more comfortable with it because it still feels strange being like a delivery company and having people come to my home. It still feels strange, but Allie really motivated me when she talked about the quantities of these garlands that she was doing. Like she has, she can have 10 or 15 pickups on a Thursday evening. And that specifically was the one thing she said that like really hit home for me is that she does all of her pickups like Thursdays and Fridays. Like she's not having people come and pick up their garlands on Saturdays, which is so obvious, but I never thought about that until she was on the show. So thank you so much for that. So now not only do I have like a grab and go page set up on my website, but I have it completely automated. This happened like a week ago. I finally figured out how to automate everything. Again, it's all through 17 Hats. So if people want to buy a grab and go garland, they go to that website, they can select which Thursday they want to pick it up, and they select what time they're coming. The window for me, it's like between 4 and 7 p.m. So they pick the time, they pick if they want to do 1 or 2 garlands. 2 is the maximum that I'm allowing right now just because like they're not going to fit in people's cars. They're going to show up and like it's just going to be a nightmare. So 2 is the maximum. And then they pay and they're done. That's it. I never do anything. It feels like magic. Yesterday, actually, I got my first straight grab and go order. Like I got a notification on my phone from 17 Hats just saying like, you have a new booking, $200 was just deposited into your account. Like that is such a nice feeling. So I'm definitely going to be pushing and advertising those grab and go garlands really, really hard this next year. I think that there's a ton of potential there. And it's not only potential to almost like expand my weekend a day earlier. So now my pickups are starting on Thursdays and my jobs are on Fridays, Saturdays. But the idea that I don't have to talk to anyone, that I didn't get any emails, that I didn't have to go back and forth, like the fact that I've automated it is like a huge win for me. I'm really, really excited. What else? Oh, my van. That to me is like, that was the biggest game changer for my business this year. That was a goal that I set at Summit last year. I wanted to buy a van. And to be honest, moving homes, which I know I've talked a little bit, that we moved from like a residential neighborhood and we moved to a house that has a storefront attached to it. So it's a real odd little property that we moved to. And luckily my husband is awesome and supportive and he was all for it. That move financially left some money on the table that then I was able to buy my van in full with cash. So those two things together really, really made a difference in my company. It was kind of like a 1-2 punch. And within a month or two, I was just in like a totally different spot with my business. I had a designated storefront. I had a van. Like all these big purchases were possible because of moving homes. So that was kind of all wrapped into one big life change, really. Even though we moved like less than a mile from our own home. So it didn't feel like a huge life change, but like, man, we are still living in construction. We are still renovating this house. Like it's been a hard year. And it's hard to do it with a toddler, but getting that van was by far the best thing I have ever done for my business. And I hate debt. I hate taking on debt. I would never encourage it, except I would recommend financing a van and getting one. If you are renting U-Hauls, like if you have jobs where you're taking multiple trips or you're renting trucks all the time, which is what I was doing, the freedom and the time that this van has saved me, just the time waiting in line at the stupid U-Haul place, let alone the price of the U-Haul trucks. Like the van is totally a purchase for convenience. But it was like magically, I was quoting bigger jobs. Like I could feel myself like instead of one 20-foot arch, what about 2 30-foot arches? Like that would have never fit into my previous SUV. So I would have never even proposed that. But now I'm just kind of getting gutsier with what I propose and people are buying. So it's kind of all factored into one. It was like a mental shift that getting the van gave me in terms of quoting my jobs. And then people are buying bigger things, and now I'm filling that van already. So it really, really did change my business beyond just the convenience of having a bigger car. Like that is amazing. That makes life easy. But it really has upped my sales and upped like my average sales ticket. Like before I would say like my average job was like $200 or $300. Now I would say my average job is like, right now I'm probably around like between $500 and $800, like on average, which is why it has been easier to kind of get stricter with these grab and go garlands. Like $100, I'm not saying that's not a lot of money. That is to the average person, but like I'm not going to fill my Saturday with $300 drop-offs. I want to fill my Saturday with two $3,000 jobs, if that makes sense. So sorry that there's a lot of overlap between these things, but my business really has shifted a lot, and a lot of that motivation and a lot of that inspiration has come from podcast episodes and guests. I also hit some financial goals. I kind of referenced that in the last point about like moving homes, and that changed kind of our financial situation. So then I was able to buy the van, and I'm not going to go into specifics. I don't feel like I want to like overshare finances. But I did share some personal financial goals that I hit this year, and I shared that in the Balloon Boss Mastermind, that private Facebook group. Again, because those are people that I talk to like kind of every day. That's kind of my inner circle of people. So that's one more reason why I love promoting the Balloon Boss Mastermind, because it really is like a closed, private, safe group where you can celebrate wins that like probably aren't appropriate to celebrate with like your coworkers, or like just to do a blast out on Facebook for the world to see. That's a little bit more of a guarded group. But I really am proud of myself. I hit some financial goals that I set. And then I already talked about Nicole. I talked about hiring my employee. But I'm really excited, and I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but I'm really excited that she is more than an assistant, that she is a strategist. So she is a 17 hats expert. She is teaching me all about the software that, like, I love 17 hats. I'm sponsored by 17 hats at Balloon Boss Summit. Like, I love them. But she is really the person who has been able to push me to like dive in, to use some of those features. So I'm just going to slip this in here now, even though, again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But if you are one of the people, and there's many of you, that have reached out to me or wanted to reach out to me because you're really interested in 17 hats, but you need help, send me an email. I'm just going to ask you to send me an email at thebrightballoon@gmail.com. We're bouncing around ideas for how Nicole could help you. She has been so valuable to me. I just know there's a lot of you out there that either have 17 hats and you're not using it to its full potential, or you need something and you just don't even know where to start. Or some of you just like want to see a deeper dive into what what the software has to offer. I unfortunately just like don't have the time to get into all of that as much as I want to. I simply am so swamped right now. I have projects in the works that like I haven't even talked about yet, but I think Nicole has potential to be a really great resource for the entire balloon community. And I'm throwing her to the wolves a little bit, but she knows. We've talked about this, and she's probably listening to this episode right now, rolling her eyes at me. But all I'm asking is that if you are interested in more help when it comes to 17 hats, send me an email at thebrightballoon@gmail.com and just tell me, just put 17 hats info in the subject line and leave your email address, and I'll get you on a list so that when we roll out any future plans, and again, we don't know what these plans are. It could be a course, it could be a group coaching, little cohort, but I think that is where Nicole is going to be really valuable. And if you want to be kind of in the early stages of that, make sure that I have your email. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. But Nicole is going to be around and helping, I think, more than just me. I think she's going to be helping a lot of you. All right, next steps. Thinking about the future, not really of my business. I feel like I've hit a stride with Wisconsin Balloon Decor. I'm in a really good spot right now, and I think I'm just going to maintain for the next year. That's kind of going to be my goal, is just to kind of keep things where they are because they're in a really good spot. I want to streamline more. I want to be as efficient as possible. But I really think my future goals, a lot of them are going to revolve around the podcast and the Bright Balloon as like a brand. That wasn't necessarily my intention when I started the podcast. Really, I started the Bright Balloon because it seemed confusing to be promoting this podcast for balloon professionals on Wisconsin Balloon Decor platforms, because that's like where my customers are, and that this isn't for them. This is for you guys. So I'm really glad that on a whim, I just kind of went in the direction of starting like a side brand. So I think that there's a lot of potential with the Bright Balloon. I get a lot of questions from people. They're wanting courses on really simple stuff, like how do I make my bases? How do you do an arch? What type of equipment do I use? Like, I think there's a lot of potential for new courses. And I think there's a lot of potential for, honestly, just like digging in on the podcast. I think there's a lot of guests that I could bring on. I think that Nicole is going to really take over the digital side in terms of making sure that our emails go out, regularly, that our posting schedule is really predictable. Sometimes I'm a day or two late, even though I do typically do an episode every week. But like, I understand that it's frustrating when like you're expecting it to come out on a Tuesday and it comes out on a Thursday, and that right now that is just because it's just me, and sometimes life happens. I think that we can focus on resources. I feel like that is where the Bright Balloon has kind of landed in terms of all the education that's out there. I love having the free podcast to just chat and ramble, and the feedback I've gotten has been really encouraging. But I think what I would like to provide more of is resources, like something like the garland guide, not just a course on how to make garlands, but a very tangible, marketable guide that you can essentially download and use the next day to start increasing your sales. So I'm really interested in exploring some of those resources. And then kind of another side project is that I am focusing this next year on some like really big opportunities and really big projects. So I am involved in Balloon Wonderland, which is the Qualitex event next summer. It's kind of what World Balloon Convention turned into, and now it is this big giant build that is going to be with 300 people, around 300 balloon people from around the country. And last I heard, I think we are planning to use 300,000 balloons, which is really incredible. And when you learn more about this, it all goes to charity. This entire event is to benefit sick kids, and we're working with a charity down there and an organization, and all of this to say, I'm involved in like the design end, which is something so big and so overwhelming that I've never taken on a project this large, and luckily I'm part of a team, but it's still really overwhelming. But I'm interested in the potential of doing big events like this. The idea that not only is it benefiting children, but it's also bringing tourism to an area, and it's also bringing balloon artists together to do things that we could never ever accomplish on our own. Like it's really inspiring. So Stuart Davies, who is organizing this whole Balloon Wonderland thing on behalf of Qualitex, he and I are chatting about other opportunities as well. And there will be one coming up in the next couple of years that I can't say much about right now. But anyway, just as a personal kind of goal of mine, I'm really kind of leaning into some of those bigger, scarier projects that I think last year I probably wouldn't have had the courage to do. But whatever. If not me, then who? That's kind of what my mantra has become. If not you, then who? Like, I have all these ideas and I'm not qualified to do them, and I'm not super skilled and I don't really have experience in a lot of these areas, but like, if I'm not going to do it, then, who is? So whatever. I'm just going to go for a lot of new experiences and new adventures. I have lots of ideas. And again, this podcast is one of my favorite things that kind of materialized out of nowhere. Honestly, this was kind of like a quarantine guinea pig. Like I was bored. I needed something to do. So I started this podcast, and I'm just so thankful that so many of you have stuck around for a year or found me in the last year. I've done very little advertising. That is one of the things that I hope to amp up, because the more people that listen, the more support we have, the more cool guests I can bring on, and the better our resources can be. So again, if you are one of those early supporters and you are feeling compelled to check out the Patreon, that link is in the show notes. And if not, no pressure. That is totally fine. This will always be a totally free resource for you. So with that, I have once again rambled. That seems to be my signature move here, just rambling all the time. And don't worry, the guest episodes are coming back. I am going to record a lot of those in person at Balloon Boss Summit. So we're going to have financial advice. We're going to have people who have just like taken their business up a level in this last year. People who got into balloons for the first time over the pandemic, like all sorts of people will be on the show in the next year. And I'm really excited to bring those back. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week. And don't forget to email thebrightballoon@gmail.com if you are interested in getting involved early with some of our 17 hats strategy sessions. We'll just call those that for now. All right, talk to you guys later.
That wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I tried to keep it bright and light in a few minutes or less. I'll talk to you next time. For more information about any of the resources or courses mentioned in today's show, please head to thebrightballoon.com or check the show notes wherever you're listening.